Hi there. Today I'm looking into another plugin. This time is a plugin from Hornet. Hornet does a lot of cool plugin effects. Now this one is a little bit harder to explain. It's called Harmoniq. It's Harmoniq. It's an EQ of harmonics. Now it's made to help you in specific ways to fix your tracks, to make them sound better. The logic comes from the fact that when you listen to a sound, a musical note being played, what is the musical part is the harmony. It's the fact that you have a fundamental and you have frequencies that are multiple of the original one, so of the one playing. So these makes the note that we listen, the musicality of it. Now, everything else that is around that, these are other frequencies that are not bad. They're just in harmonics. They're just not playing the same note. They're part of the texture of the sound, and they're different for snares, kicks, flute, violin, everything that is more percussive by default as more in harmonics, because the tonality is more rhythmic than musicality note-wise. So you still hear a note in the kick, you still hear a note in the snare. You know, you need to tune them. And hi-hats also, you can hear it, but you're not playing them in a way that it changes over time. You're more playing them into the rhythmic pattern. So the inharmonics in it are part of the noisy part. You know, when you hit a snare, there's chains under it. That's why you have that noise. When you hit a cymbal, it's not just a note, but it's this shimmering noise of a lot of frequencies in harmonics and harmonics. So when you start mixing all of that, and when you start mixing all your tracks and all your sound, one thing you do as a mixer, you clean the track. And that means many things. One of the things that you do when you clean the tracks, you try to get rid of frequencies that are fighting for the presence of the instrument that you want to put in front, that everybody wants to listen. You know, you're playing a bass, you want to hear the bass. You play a guitar, you want to hear the note, the melody that you're playing. What you're doing is doing different things, like you take a parametric EQ, and then you take the frequency and you boost it, and you take a very narrow Q or narrow band, if you want, of the frequency, and then you play with your filter until you hear the bad part very enhanced. And that part, basically, when you listen to it, is fighting with the presence of the note, the core of that sound. So you basically cut it, you know, and you do it by ear for all of the instruments that you have. Try to figure out what makes it cleaner and easier to listen, because after that, when you're going to mix stuff, you want the frequencies that are the one that you're following for the music to take the first, you know, the stage, the front of the stage as you hear it. And everything else, you want it to be background noise that is part of the texture of the sound, but it doesn't fight for the presence. So it comes from the logic that if you have, let's say on the snare, the main sound of the snare, and then you've got another frequency that is kind of fighting for the place, the problem is that when you're going to compress the signal, and I know I'm going far now, but when you're going to compress the signal later, because that's the other step of cleaning your track, is that to control the dynamics of the tracks. If you compress it, well, that other frequency that was lower now becomes louder, and then it really fights for the presence when you listen to it, because you have these two frequencies. It might be exactly what you want, but most of the time, a lot of these sounds you want to get rid of. They might have been recorded in a place where there was a rumble in the sound, or that frequency was resonating by the size of the room. It might be from the recording that you did. In any case, you usually do that. You clean the tracks. Now, this plugin does that for you in a very efficient way. It analyzes the sound playing, and then it brings up the frequency that are fighting the main. So it will analyze what is the main frequency playing, the most obvious note, you know, the fundamental, and say everything that is not in link with this is why I suggest to bring down. And then you can control that. Now, just by that logic, it works more efficiently when you solo one sound. Let's say you have just one bass or just one guitar or just the kick, just the snare, and not the whole drum. You can also do it for the whole thing. I suggest you do it on separate tracks like you would do when you go in and then you EQ just the kick, just the snare. And that's so. Let's look at what this is. I'm gonna solo the kick. Okay. It's a kick that sounds even electronic in a way, but it's a recording of a real kick. Look at the Hornet. You turn it on, the Harmoniq, and then when you click reset, right now if I bypass it, you need to put your headphone for this. It's just in the back. You press reset. It's going to analyze the sound. And it's going to come back with, that's the frequency that was a big click. You get this frequency, this one, and these. So you can bring it up, bring it down. You can also click on delta. Shows you what it's cutting. It's cutting this. So okay, this is a bad. You're right. It's not a good section of the sound. Now, if you want to change where it's happening, you could say, I want to get rid of only these two here. So by changing the lower limit, I don't cut this one, or I can keep that one and cut, but there's 1,000. You cannot go lower than this. But you could center something here, like in the middle. But you can cut, say, I just want to use these. And you can hear just the delta. So that's interesting to see what it actually is cutting. And you can bypass it. Let's say we keep that. Let's go for the snare now. You have this one. Now this one is, I'm going to activate it. Going to reset. So I'm asking to rescan. So you see the frequency of where it's actually cutting the frequencies. If you click delta, that's the part that it's picking out. But they believe it's gunk. Take it out. Go back to. Then take it out. So it's cleaner. You have more of the high pitch, less of the bottom. That's a choice. You could say, I would like to have the, so you can bring this down. You can say, well, I want to have half of it. Or I want to have a lot. It's very nasal and high pitched because you're cutting all the other ones. Okay. There's another snare here. There's this epic snare. I'm going to solo this. So this one has more bottom. Okay, let's turn this, let's go turn on and reset. Reset is analyzing the sound again. Now this becomes, let's say we bring that down to, we have this frequency here. If you bring it up, and in this case, you're right that there's a lot of bottom and it's kind of rumbling. Ooh, ooh. When you bring it up, so then it becomes a choice of the style and the sound you want. I would say I want to keep a bit of it. So I'm going to put it around, I don't know, 35. And then what we get rid of is kind of that boxiness. If I don't have it, with it. Okay. And then we'll try that for the hi-hat also. Harmoniq. There you go. So you'll press. Again, it's a question of what you want. Do you find that this is actually helping or not? So if you don't like it, you don't have to take it, or you can change and say, well, I want less of it because I would still want to have that little high-end sizzle. Okay, fine. So if you take everything now back to maybe these two now. So that's the logic. That's how it works. Now you can do this for voice, for guitar, for all of it. So every time is basically you take your sound, you put it in, you scan, and then you play a little bit with it. Just for the fun of it. This is the sound of it with this on every track separately. So let's take it all out. Okay. And then put it on the master instead. See, go reset here. So it does work, but it doesn't look for the same thing. It has it globally, and it takes a couple of one that are less of quality. So you take it out. So this is really to clean up your track, to make them sound better, to then finalize your mix in a more efficient manner. It doesn't show, it doesn't scream like, oh, it's huge, it's big, but it's a huge thing because this helps you EQ your tracks separately before mixing. It's part of the process of doing a good mix. So this is a really cool thing because it just like, hey, find it for me, EQ. What I would like to have is separate controls. Instead of having these two lower limits here and higher limits, I understand that you can create a band where you're going to process. I will have to have more control and say what band. Or let's say this now has, if each of these would have a point, then I could click on it and say deactivate this one. I want to keep that resonating frequency, but I don't want to keep the other one. Or I want to get rid of these two, but I want to keep all of them. So that would be super cool. I know every time I'm testing something, I try to figure out what else could it be. But if you want to put this in your thinking cap Hornet for the next version, having maybe separate controls or more control about the bands that you have here, I find it interesting but in a way, if it finds the right thing and then you just control the amount, it's already pretty cool. That's it. I hope this actually helps you get faster into having a better mix. Because for me, I find it really, really, really interesting. So the mix that I'm doing right now, I'm using it to clean up the tracks, and I'm finding out problems that I didn't hear or it wasn't obvious for me. But now when I use the delta and the bypass, I go, oh yeah, that part. So when everything's cleaner, you have a more efficient mix and everybody can listen and hear how every part of your sound of the song is playing. So that's pretty cool. That's it. Stay safe, make more music, and see you soon. Cheers.